Welcome, Chris. Yeah, your first time on the New Levels Coaching podcast. How are we?
Good, thanks. Much appreciated to be here.
Brill. Well, yeah, it's great. It's great to have you along. And we always kick off every podcast episode with a little bit of inspiration. We say that we are the podcast that brings inspiration and education to the endurance world, but it's good to find out who has inspired you on your journey. So I'm going to start off by asking Chris, can you pick an inspirational person who maybe still inspires you to this day or has certainly inspired your coaching journey in some way?
Yeah, this was great question to kick off with. It's my wife, Polly, for numerous reasons, but she was the professional athlete at one point. She was the one that, where we moved abroad and for different reasons. And we lived very much a full-time training lifestyle. And in one way or another, like really kind of cemented our, like the business, what we now have, and lots of different. Well, I've learned a lot from being a couple and obviously being married now and having children, but that whole journey, yeah, Polly would be it, I think. So all the mentors and things I've had over the years and coaches I've had personally, it is my wife, I would say, for sure.
That's really nice to hear. Yeah, I can relate to that too. Being in a business with my wife as well, and having had the support from her to set things up. But I was asked a similar question for a running camp actually the weekend. They said who inspires you, and she made my top three list. I was asked for a couple of people. My wife was on there, so I can relate to it. But yeah, really nice start. Excellent. And I like our viewers and listeners to get to know the person behind every podcast episode. And obviously, I do an introduction and I introduce you, but I always think that's better coming from the person themselves. So, yeah, enlighten our viewers and listeners into a little bit more about yourself and your background. And you can go back as far as you like, Chris.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it goes right back to school, college time, trying to work out who I wanted to be, and could work out if I wanted to be a physio, a teacher, a coach, and I was kind of dabbling with all of it at one point. Sports science degree, did a bit of traveling, always coaching, always kind of like working in gyms, working as a physio assistant, and kind of just trying to work out which direction I wanted to go. And then we ended up moving abroad as a couple, and we met at university about 20 years ago, and yeah, like. Being an S&C coach, being a partner to an aspiring triathlete, it was kind of working in gyms over in Australia on the Gold Coast. We were living in Byron Bay for a time. It kind of naturally, organically, kind of grew into myself, then into Strength for Endurance as a business, and we spent a chunk of time over in Australia and kind of building the business, building the brand, and but whilst also Polly was training full time and kind of living that kind of almost nomadic lifestyle, moving around event to event, and the whole way along just working with ultra distance athletes and triathletes and runners from middle distance all the way through to again ultra distances, and just understanding that primarily as a strength and conditioning coach, which is kind of what makes me, I love working in that space. It's kind of that was always the premise to start with, was how to integrate S&C into endurance training in general. And it was a hard sell 15 years ago, and I was going, but now it's never been more prevalent now in social media and in media and everything now, which is great. But now it's come to a point where we moved back, had children, we've had to navigate the interesting kind of journey from going from full-time athlete into being parents. And then obviously building the business alongside that. That was we've talked about it over the years, like that navigating that kind of not rocky but turbulent time of trying to have children after training full time. It's in terms of hormonally, etc. I learned a lot. And then having a gym in Bath, for Bath city centre for a number of years, building a community there, and then always having an online presence, and then that kind of taking off big time about 5 or 6 years ago, and building an online community, and now we're very much an endurance coaching company, primarily helping a lot of people with how integrating S&C into their endurance training lifestyle. A lot of rehab, so we work as a multidisciplinary team now. So we've always had physios on staff, but running coaches, triathlon coaches, physios, S&C coaches, all working under one roof. And then, and now that's where we're at. 2 young boys, family, and running a great business that looks after a really, really strong community of a very eclectic mix of endurance people. Swimming the Channel, UTMB, London Marathon, Dragon's Back, all of the above. So it's been a good 10, 15 years of journey. But I could talk about my injuries in the past. Like I was severely injured a couple of times playing roller hockey and inline hockey growing up. Again, inspiring me to kind of be more, to really get deep dive into the kind of the injury rehab side of things. But yeah, loads there. But just a little bit of a roadmap there.
A fascinating journey, yeah. And one I'm very interested in, because as a business owner, sometimes you see stories online of businesses booming within the first couple of years, but actually a lot of businesses, they go through, as you described, turbulent times with the business, family, and other aspects of their life, and it's a slow process of building a successful business. So it's quite inspirational to hear what you've done and how you've come back and settled in the UK, and lots of similarities with the athletes we work with. But one of my questions off the back of that is, I guess we get a lot of questions around S&C. It's one of the biggest or the hottest topics we get. Whenever we do a workshop or a day, there's a lot of questions around rehab and S&C in particular. You mentioned about 10, 15 years ago, maybe that wasn't the case. People were a lot less reluctant to be putting things like strength and conditioning in their plan. Why do you think we've seen that change, Kriss, just out of interest from your perspective?
I think people just really realizing that there's so much to be gained from a couple of good sessions a week, and just understanding that it actually is very easy to integrate it into your lifestyle. It's just knowing what it needs to look like, what it needs to be. Obviously, social media, of course, that's completely sped things up and obviously reinforced it 1,000-fold. No matter what aspect of endurance you train in, cycling, running, long distance, short distance, middle distance, whatever it is, there's pretty much there's a couple of good key role models championing it, over the last number of years, or last decade. So, but yeah, no, I won't lie to you, going to events, way back when in Australia and stuff, we go to these like event as an event exhibitor, and my word, it was a hard sell. Like people just wanted to run more, ride more, and but they're still struggling with injury, and they couldn't work out why they couldn't tolerate those longer distances. They couldn't get up to those consistent speeds and intensities, and they were working with bodies that were potentially broken or hadn't done a lot for a long time, and so they just lacked that depth of conditioning in their body. And you're just like, well, I think it's the research has supported that. We'll talk about Richard, Blagrove and things later on, but the research has really accelerated over the years, and the media outlets have championed that a lot as well, where it's just so obvious. Like, it's become very, very obvious. Like, we are all aging, we are all getting injured, and there's that muscle atrophy along the way with all of that. And how in the world are you going to rebuild that just by running more? You're not. You've got to be doing some other work into those key areas. And I think it's confusion as to what that looks like. And obviously we've got so much in the realm of fitness that it can be very confusing as to what is appropriate for that person. And I think there's still a bit of confusion there, obviously. But I think that would be some of the reasons anyway.
Yeah, so again, some really good points. And I think one of your last points you made there about it becoming, more aware in the media and also them championing it. I think a lot of people who look at S&C from a sports performance perspective have always kind of had a little bit of importance there, if not heaped a lot of importance in that area. Certainly from my background in Loughborough, I see that, and it's a very staple part of a lot of people's programming. But what we're seeing now is not just with people we coach in everyday life. I've got family members who are certainly taking that conversation a lot more seriously about getting to the gym and starting to lift weights. And it seems like that education, that literature, that research is really pushing that. And then as a result, we're seeing people who are more active, which is great, because I remember a famous saying, a runner, and Steve Cram always tells the story when I work with him. He's like, one of the old coaches said, "Why would you want to do weights, sunshine? You don't pick up any weights when you're running a marathon." And that kind of stigma is well and truly gone now, hasn't it?
Oh, you know what? I want to say it is, but it isn't. Like, you still see, and I don't know, like within the triathlon world, you're still seeing it a lot, where people are like, I don't know if it's arrogance, it's ignorance, or I don't know what it is, but it's like they poo-poo it. They sort of say you don't need to do that, and they're not. I I think it's the lack of understanding as to what it looks like, like how it can. And so instead of one opening up their minds to like, okay, what does it need to look like for my athletes? It's the opposite. They shut the door on it and go, no, don't need it. But it's the long term, effects of like, putting high volume training into a young adult body, into a middle aged body, high speeds. So you're up at the track. You're training 2 or 3 times a week up at the track. Like, people are still quite naive or ignorant to the amount of force and making sure that your body can meet those expectations. You're on a marathon build and you're expecting your body to build towards those higher volumes of training at week 12, 13, 14, 15 of a program. With the body you've currently got, like in week 1, like what are you it's not just an aerobic, you're not just building up that aerobic base. You've got to be making sure that your tendons, ligaments, but those basic muscle groups can tolerate all that work as well, and I think it's just lack of understanding as to what it looks like still. I think that old guard who are still potentially gatekeeping and on some levels, like on some fronts, I think, the new guard coming through are like, no, it's just obvious. You just need to be doing something. You need to be doing some Bulgarian split squats and band work and doing some core work and whatever, because it's just, I need to be stronger to go further or to go faster. So yeah, I'm of two minds, because I still personally get triggered when I'm seeing people like poo-pooing it, like young coaches training junior athletes who probably look like they don't need it, or you work with these older coaches who probably don't understand what it looks like, so they just don't even acknowledge it. And I think it's but it's the middle ground. There's a lot of people in the middle ground now which are promoting it, and a lot of people are trying to work it in. I think it's whether how much they're pushing it. I think how much they're kind of selling it.
Yeah, and like you said, it probably comes down to a lot of understanding, doesn't it? And people think, oh well, I didn't do it, so it didn't work for me, so I'm not going to give it to the athletes that I coach. Well, there's a lot of things that you probably did back in the day that people don't do now, and they're happy to prescribe those things. The shoes we run in are a lot different, and even looking at that from a strength and conditioning perspective, like people need to be stronger now to tolerate those things that they're putting on the feet. So there's a lot to unpick there. But yeah, I think people who are stuck in their own way and aren't willing to learn will always come unstuck in the long run. But I guess that links nicely to where you're going with, and I assume it's a newer business venture with the Endurance Speaker Series, because you're looking to educate people within that running community, not just people who are, runners, triathletes, cyclists, swimmers, but also the coaches as well within there. And to kind of set the scene for people, Kriss reached out to me about coming on the podcast, and I had a look at the Endurance Speaker Series, and I thought, this is fantastic. It's a great initiative. As a podcast, we preach about educating and inspiring the endurance world. And I'll be honest, I just get fed up with seeing garbage on social media and people who are putting stuff out there that I disagree with. So to see something where I see a key lineup of speakers where people can come and be educated by professionals who are proving their worth in the fields that they work in, I just thought it was brilliant. So I jumped at the chance to have you on, but I'd be I guess I'd like you to explain a little bit more to the audience around where that concept came from and what it looks like, and why you think it's so important to have that in the endurance space.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate kind of being able the opportunity to talk about it, because it's one of those things I don't want people to not know about. Like, if they know about it, then it's up to, they can make a decision around what's important to them. But yeah, I'm a coach, I'm a teacher. Like, I've always been an educator of some sort, from 20 plus years now, my whole career in some capacity. And to not know what you could be doing to improve your health, your performance, and most people we get to work with, and I'm around are action takers. They're people that just want to be healthy and want to, they're prepared to do something about whatever situation they're in. If they're broken, they're injured, if they are struggling with performance, if they want to go further, go faster, okay, what do I need to know? What do I need to do? And sometimes it's just the education. And obviously, being in this space for so long, you get to know some amazing leaders, experts in their fields. And this comprehensive training approach, where I always say, like, training hard's the easy bit, like, in a weird way, like, like turning up, training 6 days a week. Like, I know it's hard, don't get me wrong, but like going to the track, doing those long runs, like doing the necessary kind of maintenance work around it, fueling maybe, but like there's other areas of training that just really need to be championed, and it doesn't get championed enough, I don't believe. Like, and when we are looking at some of these experts we've got here, in terms of understanding what the science and literally literature is telling us, and has been telling us for 10 years around strength conditioning, like prevention of overtraining, which is like the leading factor as to why so many people are getting injured, like long-term tendinopathies, bone stress injuries. How are they not the scariest, the kind of injuries that we're seeing at the moment, within the endurance community? Because it's potentially, understanding what those signs and symptoms look like in terms of preventing it from ever happening, and it's just not knowing what those signs are potentially. And, for those that understand it, we'll be able to act. Hydration, Andy Blow from Precision Fuel and Hydration, understanding how to, so you're not DNFing in races in these longer distances and, different climates. And no, we just brought together some amazing experts, and again, just through my personal work with clients, but also just my own professional development, wanting to know more about, understanding the importance of training through the menopause, understanding the when you're as an athlete, as a female athlete, being on contraception, what that means, like not knowing what your hormonal status looks like, training hard as a young woman, up at the track, 6 days a week, but you haven't had a menstrual cycle in 5 years, 10 years, like that's telling, you don't know the actual physiological health of your body. And so again, it's understanding this stuff along the way. And as a coach, as a trainer, as a whoever you are, like, it's to have this type of knowledge, to know how you can just make a few little changes. It's empowerment. And it's been something that's been a passion project in the back of my head for a long time. And I literally just went last year, I said to these particular speakers, I said, would you be up for this? Would you be able to present for us? But the key concept behind the speaker series is the application part. So I'd like to think some of your audience will probably have heard some of these speakers speak before, and I know you know Richard well, but it's the application. All these principles and methods and research and everything else, it's all well and good, but if you train on your own, train at home, or you train at a club, and how do you then take that information and bring it into your lifestyle? And the second part of every event is us going back into that room and actually breaking down what your environment is, what you're training, how you train, what your struggles are, and having those experts as part of a panel where we actually break this down, and everyone's going to walk away with a little toolkit, a potential a module from each of these they can take away into their own training, into their own coaching, into their own treatment, whatever they're doing. But yeah, just kind of really kind of bringing this all together. So, and then obviously with each topic, it's going to relate more to different people at different times in their training. So, yeah.
Nice. A really good explanation as well. And what I liked about it was something you touched on early when you were describing kind of the business that you set up and how you've grown that, and how it's almost become like a multifactorial now with lots of people input in, and, teams of people. And that's what we're seeing in the endurance world a lot more. I spend a lot of time now coaching ultra runners, and they're putting teams together of teams around the athletes. It maybe comes from kind of cycling and triathlon, but we're seeing it a lot more even in the running world. And when I looked at the speaker series, I thought, wow, this is like a team. Kriss has put together here a team who people could come and listen to and learn from and be educated from. And then, like you say, have that application part where they could take these learnings away and start to implement these things into their own training. And it's not just, I'm getting a coach who's telling me and being prescriptive around what I'm doing. I can learn a lot more about different areas here, which impact all of my training. And that word team, which is what we're seeing a lot in the elite world, I think a lot of people who class themselves as, recreational athletes who do it for their passion and their love of the sport, they are thinking like, I need to speak to physios. I need to go and find out more about my health. I might need to speak to a sports doctor. I might need to go and see an S&C coach. So what you've done here is, I think, is very clever, and it's very, it's very inspiring as well, because I think it's a great initiative. Is you're giving people that option to come and almost tap into these experts who are brilliant, and then take it away and put it into their training.
Wait, it's exactly what I would have wanted 10 years ago, and I still want now. I'm equally as excited to sit there and go, yep, didn't know that, that's gold, reinforce that, like as you say, like there's only so much one person can know and what will want to know, like, everyone has their kind of, but when you're working with people in general, like from elite through to beginner, like no matter what the distance, the sport is complex. There's a level of complexity when you start applying training in general to an individual with a busy lifestyle, with a checkered history of injury or whatever they've got going on in the background. And like tapping in to these individuals and having some of these key resources, these kind of key strategies and key tips and guidelines that they could be applying into their own training. And again, if you're a coach, if you're an athlete, if you are just, it doesn't matter what level you're at, there's something for everyone here. And as you said, that team, I like, the multidisciplinary team approach, I've always, from this, when you're dealing with injury, like you just immediately know you're going to need a team around you, right? Because you just know, right, consultants, you're going to need physios, you're going to need strength conditioning coaches, and you're going to need your performance coaches, to get back to running, triathlon, whatever their sport is. So you immediately, like, it's a no-brainer. You need a team around you. But I think you're like yourself, like coming from like high performance, it's a no-brainer again. Team, like you can't do it on your own. You need a nutritionalist or like a psychologist, or you need a strength conditioning coach or a performance coach. Like you just have to have that. When you're dealing with the general public, they don't often have that network. And this is what this is about. It's like, how can we give people a network, give people that kind of education that maybe isn't available within their national governing bodies at the moment, where it isn't accessible online in one place. This is kind of the start of it, and very much looking to kind of build it out module by module almost, but, and it'll there's other aspects to these that we are kind of already looking at, kind of mapping out for the future, other areas of training that could, injury, being one of the ones, like having something, we've got a couple of injury specialists that we want to bring in, but this was the start. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and that's a good point around like the national governing bodies. We went to a fantastic day up in Leeds last year. It was more of a marathon endurance camp, and they definitely took that multidisciplinary approach where they were bringing performance athletes there, and they had the chance to, go and watch a session or observe a session with Dave Mitchell and the S&C coach up there at Leeds. And then they were in a nutrition consultation. They were seeing psychologists. They were doing some testing, all those things that would surround elite performance. But I think you've hit the nail on the head. The general public don't really have access to that. And in my opinion, the national governing bodies and, whether we look at that from a regional level or national level, I don't think they do enough in that regard, considering if you look at the demographic and the population, the majority of people sit in that bottom bracket, which is the bottom of the pyramid, which is participation. That's where everybody sits. The performance level is actually very, very, very narrow at the top. And a lot of those people will take care of it themselves, which is why a lot of elite athletes don't necessarily pay for it, because they either get it for free or already have it around them. But these people at the bottom, they're so invested in themselves, but they want this type of thing. It's often just not readily available. So I think it's great that there's an option there. One of my key questions, Kriss, was how did you narrow it down? What did you sit down and look at? Was it a case of looking at who you knew already who might be relevant, or did you look at the areas that you wanted to include?
Both. So you look at your immediate professional network, network, and go, okay, but it is that kind of, there's an order to it. It's overtraining being number one, making, like, that is, I think, one of the ones that's probably most under recognized or least understood, because it is complex, and so how do you break that down? Who would be able to kind of start that conversation? How could it start to unpack that conversation? And Nicola Marsh was straight away recommended. And actually, I've only met Nicola in the last 6 months, but her work's fantastic, working out of London, referred on from Dr. Nikki Kay, who is obviously a specialist in endocrinology. And we worked together years ago in Bath together. So, but yeah, it was just that professional network. But essentially, there's themes there, right? There's strength and conditioning, there's fueling, there's hydration, there's overtraining, there's training through the menopause. These are, I like to think, obvious areas of training that should be spoken about relentlessly within a training program. If you're a coach up at the track, you are training someone online, you're working in the gym, on the gym floor with someone, you're taking a group riding session, or even down at the poolside, like open conversations around menstrual cycle, open conversations around fueling strategy, hydration, strength conditioning. Like, we want it to be, in my dream world, potentially, you want every single person that comes through the Run Leader Award with England Athletics to have this concept in their heads. Like, I need to know more about these concepts, because I'll share with you a catalyst. Last November, I was up at the European Endurance Conference up in Leeds, and I saw some statistics of coaches coming through over the last year, qualified coaches. I think it said like 14,000 new run leaders had qualified in 2024 or in the last 12 months. Like, amazing, like, to see that increase in the community. But I've done that qualification, and to know that they're probably working with the mums and dads, the kind of the most, they're probably in charge of the general population, and they're kind of at that critical time in their life, to generalize, maybe they're working with people who are probably 30 through 60, maybe, and you think, do they have the level of education to help people facilitate doing more strength conditioning, understanding more about their blood and hormonal health, navigating the menopause, understanding how to fuel better? Probably not, but yet they're out, and so that again was a catalyst. I was like, oh, just do this, like, just make it happen, like, just make this happen, because those that want to help people more or help facilitate change, like, they're not doing this, they're not doing S&C, but they're making those conversations, because they're the people on the ground. They're the people who are every night, every day of the week, they're kind of interacting with these individuals who probably need a little bit of help in these areas, So yeah, a bit of an insight.
Yeah, it's a really good insight, because when I did my athletics coach qualification, one of the kind of things that stood out to me was there was people in the room who were there for very different reasons. I remember having a conversation with a lady, and she was just to the point. She was like, look, I'm not here for the same reasons as you, and I find it baffling that we're going to go and get the same qualification. She said, I'm here because my athletics club needs another coach to stand on a stopwatch on a Tuesday night. And she said, and I need this qualification to allow that to happen. She said, whereas you're clearly here for a different reason, and I feel like this qualification doesn't really fit both those dynamics. And I could see what she was saying, but the conversation then led to an open conversation in the room. And one of the things we were talking about was, it's on almost the coach to then go and develop themselves and look at how far they take that and get that understanding in those areas. And that's where people obviously differ, depending on what you want to achieve with your coaching life. But at the time, the conversation said, well, where do we start? Where do we find all that? And I think this is a message to coaches out there that if you are wanting to learn, this isn't just for athletes, is it? This is very much for coaches as well, to go and sit and learn from the likes. So we've had Rich on the podcast before, so I'm referring to Rich, and we work with Precision, so obviously we know of Andy as well, but I know the other names. This is a great chance for coaches or leaders to go and sit with these people and learn. And it's not that you have to become a specialist in this area, but to understand it, so that you have that understanding, that level of understanding that you can apply to your coaching.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, as I said, like, way back when, I did a sports science degree, and, as I was navigating, and, you're navigating that path as to where you're going to end up, kind of thing. And, you're wanting to absorb more information, because even as an individual who just wants to get better, who just wants to go further and be consistent, you've got 5 events you want to do this year. Okay, how are you successfully going to navigate those? Well, you need to make sure that your body's going to be able to tolerate that, making sure that if you're of a certain age, like, you're making sure that if you're on contraception, understanding your blood and hormonal health, what that looks like. We want to prevent overtraining. You want to understand how to fuel, hydrate along the way. Like, these topics, because they're relatively organic. You want them to be just part of the narrative. Like, it's, I've got a training program, but also I need to make sure that I'm kind of aware of what I'm eating. Am I hydrating, my strength and conditioning? Like, they sit alongside each other. And I think for some people, it can be very much one track, because they've just never had that awareness made. And who else better to, like, champion these topics than the actual experts that are doing it day in, day out? And as I said, I'm excited to learn from them, because I was literally talking to Andy this morning about about what they're going to be presenting, and they've got so many new case studies with the cycling teams that they're working with some of the elite athletes they're working with, but also the thousands of people, men and women that are just training day to day, and so there's so much there like you can unpack from these guys. But again, relating it back to the person, like not everyone wants to go to a commercial gym with their strength and conditioning. So talking to Rich, like what can your S&C look like up at the track? What can your S&C look like training from your, at home in your garage? There's so many things that you want to kind of distill down. So you've got the research, you've got all these wonderful papers that tell us we need to do this, this, and this is what it should be. But let's bring it back down to like day to day, busy life, busy household. How can I actually then apply this? And that's what I want the uniqueness to be of this, is the application. I want everyone in that room to walk out there going, learn a lot, but actually what are my action? What are the action steps I could be doing for myself tomorrow, today, So
yeah, because there's nothing worse than something like, I get frustrated sometimes when people go to a lab test and they get all this data and they come away and they're not a coach and they have this data and they say, right, I've done this VO2 max test, this sub-max test, and here's all my data. And it's like, okay, yeah, but what's the practical implications of that? And, you're going back and getting tested. What are you doing with it now? It's great to know it. But one thing, knowing it and understanding it, and it's then applying it, which is, a key message here. I'm going to use Andy as an example, well, precision as an example, because I think a big thing sometimes that coaches worry about in particular, and I know athletes do as well, is they sometimes don't want to understand it because they think, oh, well, it's then my job to put that into the program, and I'm not a nutritionist now. I don't need to understand that. I think that we all should have a level of understanding. You don't have to be the expert, but you should have a level of understanding. And the way we work with precision is very simple. I have a basic level of understanding of nutrition from my own experience and working with people throughout my career, but I don't claim to be a nutritionist. But when we come to looking at a nutrition strategy or a fueling strategy or hydration strategy with any athletes we work with, we use the precision tools on their website and we direct the athletes there and we say to them, look, this is the practical implications of it. Like, this is what we use as coaches. This is coming from the guys who are the experts. They've created these. So let's use these as a guide. Yes, they might not always be perfect, but we can use them as a starting point. So it shows that actually it's quite simple as well. But if you get in the room with these guys, they'll tell you how it was built, why they've done it that way, the research behind it. But they often have quite simple applications. People just don't know where to access them and where to find them.
Facilitator of change, like as a coach or a teacher, right? Like I've never seen, again, going back to that complexity of people, like you're never going to know everything. And I've never been interested in wanting to know everything because there's, everyone has their passions, but when you're in front of someone and you want to, it's that having that conversation and someone is struggling with X, Y, or Z, and it's okay. Let's get you in front of a physio. Let's have a conversation with with Andy and his team. Let's have a look at your S&C. Okay, well, what are the training environments? You don't need to be doing it yourself, but you can have that network as a coach or as an individual to go, actually, I need a bit more. I'd like to know more about this. I think I need to have a conversation around X. And it's just knowing which way to go. And, we're lucky enough as coaches to have had this mind map, potentially, this network around us over the years. But yeah, again, we want making that available to everyone. Having a performance blood test, like one of the most important things I've learned in the last decade is understanding your blood and hormonal health. Working with a 17-year-old, working with a 35-year-old, working with a 50-year-old, man or woman, working towards an ultra distance event, working towards a first marathon, even just getting it back into 5K, into park runs. The expectation that you're putting on your body to train week in, week out on a body that potentially is, we don't know what those key hormonal markers are. We don't know what those key blood markers are. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people that are unknowingly training in a huge deficit, and it's a direct correlation with bone stress injuries because you're literally eroding away at your your body, like you're eroding away at bone density because you don't have that free flowing estrogen in your body. You don't have enough ferritin, iron, etc. in your body. So all it takes for most people would be a simple blood test to understand what that would look like, to have a quality conversation with the right person, and potentially you would make a few adjustments to your nutrition. Maybe you'd have to do some form of supplementation, a more complex conversation around your contraception. But essentially, you're not going to find yourself in a place where you are sitting in a physio or a consulting room, terrified because you may not be able to run for the next 6 months, 12 months because of injury, because it's just not knowing, and it's not fair. And that's obviously what we've had to deal with as a company over the decade plus now, is people that were just surprised by these random stress fractures or these issues. And it's like, my wife included. And that's obviously where the passions probably comes from, is, we struggled to have children at one point because my wife was on contraception for 10 years and trained full time for 10 years. And the body was, it was so stressed and so overtrained that it got to a place where it took 4 years for us to kind of get to a place where we could. But it was not knowing that actually contraception training, not knowing what our blood and hormonal health was at that time. All things that you could be navigating and not understanding more, but it just wasn't talked about enough back then. So, yeah, it's some good stuff.
Yeah, I appreciate you being open and honest about that as well. To think it is becoming less of a taboo subject now, particularly around women's health and hormonal health. And at the National Running Show, which is coming up this weekend, I was on the stage last year, and there was a question around training with the menopause, and the assumption of the person hosting that event was, right, we'll speak to the ladies on the stage, and I said, oh, can I come in here? I'll address the elephant in the room. I'm a bloke, and I've not experienced what you've experienced, but we don't have to experience it to know about it and understand it. And I'd spent a lot of time looking into it because I coach women of that age who are going to be affected by it. So it's my job to understand it, and it's less of a taboo subject. But the more we talk about things, particularly around female health as males, I think the better it becomes, and the better coaches we become too. So it's great that that's included on there. And again, I would encourage males who are listening to this not just to avoid those conversations, because it's probably going to affect you in some way, whether it's your partner, whether it's a friend, a family member, whether you coach somebody, whether it's a training partner, you will be affected by it in some way, and understanding it is really, really important.
On that note, communication, in terms of how you would start to approach these conversations, like with all of these topics, really, how would you, as a coach, as an individual, how would you go about even starting these conversations, creating this dialogue? It's not an easy thing. You're a track coach, you're running with you're a run leader, you're a triathlon coach, whatever your environment is, you're part of a group. How would you broach the subject? And this is what, I was talking with Nikki last week about how we're going to, in that application hour, the second part of the event, where literally case studies, how we're going to create conversation within the room so people can really understand, how would you start to talk about this? Because they're not easy. Sometimes they're not easy conversations to have, but you just need to have them sometimes, around contraception. What are the options? What are the pros and cons? You want people should understand what they want, should want to know what that looks like for themselves, because nobody wants to be on the sidelines injured because potentially they've been overtraining, under fueling, under recovering innocently, and it's not fair. And that's, again, the premise behind it, is just keep people doing what they want to do. If they want to, train, keeping people training all year round as much as they want, but to do so, it's having the knowledge, having that knowledge base and having the understanding. And that's obviously what Nikki's going to be helping us with. Nicola's going to be working on. Phil, I want to just bring up Phil Hayes, because he blew me away last November, his work on fatigue resistance. He is a level 4 kind of running coach, has been for decades, I believe, but he's also right at the forefront, and really calling out, when you're working with someone who's got two people that have got very similar VO2 maxes, very similar lactate thresholds, but one's still significantly strong, performing at higher levels. What is that point of difference? And this concept around fatigue resistance, understanding how to program more effectively, that is, we're getting a lot of traction with that one already, because people want to know how they can program more effectively around with their different athletes. But with Phil, he's on the ground. He's literally not just a researcher and a lecturer. He's actually 4 nights a week, I think, working with junior athletes. So he's applying everything to these athletes. So he's an absolute wealth of information. So again, another one that's going to be huge, a really good, powerful one up in Newcastle in the next couple of months.
Nice. Yeah, that fatigue resistance, I've spoken to a few people about this subject, it's becoming bigger. It definitely is. In fact, I'm going to a physiology meeting in Loughborough about this work, and they're bringing together physiologists and coaches looking at fatigue resistance, and durability is another term being kind of thrown around, which is so important. And on that marathon conference as well, we were sat talking about that and chatting about that with some of the best researchers in the world, which was amazing to do that. But I think, yeah, it's an avenue that's not being explored probably enough, and people are at the forefront of it. But it's massive for endurance sports, particularly these longer events. Like you say, people are looking at physiology going, this doesn't add up. They should be able to do this, and yeah, they're not seeing that durability of that fatigue resistance. So yeah, that was one of the ones when I looked on the speak list, I was like, if I was up in the northeast, I might try and get to it anywhere. That was the one that stood out for me, because I feel like there's still a lot to be gained in that area. A huge amount to be gained.
Yeah, I mean, what's the difference? What's the difference between these two young men, young women, middle-aged? Like, what's the point of difference? And actually, you're not looking at it through enough of a wider lens. You're still looking at just somebody. You're only looking at a couple of data points, and actually, it's wider than that. Like, look at their levels of strength and conditioning. Look at their force production. Look at their ability to produce power through in their strides. Like some of the data he's got on like people's stride patterns and on the forces that they're applying, especially in the latter stages of their efforts on the track and things. It's night and day, the difference, and it comes back down to their force production, their tendons, their ligaments, their muscular development, their lean muscle tissue. And again, it's that whole concept of like where it all crosses over. Like Richard talking about strength and conditioning, Phil coming in with fatigue resistance. Like it's all interconnected, and this is why I'm excited, because I just from off the back of last year's talks with the guys, like this year is going to be even more, because more research is coming through, more anecdotal evidence is coming through from them. Phil working with athletes night and day. So yeah, I think it'd be good for people to know. Obviously, there's going to be virtual seats, so if people can't make the events, because we are moving around the country with these, there's definitely opportunity for people to sit down and watch it virtually as well. So that's very much something we wanted to make sure was happening. But we wanted to go to these different parts of the country to really kind of champion the speakers themselves and make people aware in the local area of who they've got on their doorstep almost, if they wanted to tap into.
Yeah, and we'll go on to exactly, where they are and, how people access that in a second, because that's where I want to wrap things up, is to make sure people know exactly how they can access this. And it's brilliant that it's going to be virtual as well, because I think that was one of my questions, if people can't make it, how can they access the resources or be there? So that's useful to know. Before we do, I mentioned the National Running Show, which is this weekend. And I love the National Running Show. I'm unfortunately not there. I'm going down to the Arc in Cornwall because my wife's racing down there. I've got a few athletes racing this weekend. But I also have a problem with the running show. I'm going to be honest. I love it. I think it's brilliant. It brings together a running community. There's a lot of good stuff there.
Say it, Lewis.
But there's also a lot of crap there as well, and a lot of garbage. And yeah, you're laughing because you agree with me, Kriss, and I think what stands out for me with this, compared what you're doing compared to the running show, is the running show will get bums on seats because they'll put people there who are popular, not necessarily the best people for the job. But I once stood and I was listening to a talk which was brilliant. And at the same time I was listening to a talk about strength and conditioning, I was also listening to somebody behind me selling somebody a wristband that tells them that they're solving all their injury problems by putting on this metal wristband. And I thought, this is everything that's wrong and right about the National Running Show. There's a brilliant talk there. And then behind me, I've got somebody telling somebody that if they put this wristband on, that's it, all their injuries are going to go away, which was complete and utter garbage. And if you sat here and you're thinking, oh, who are you to call them out? I don't care. I'm going to call them out. It was garbage. And the thing that I like about your series is especially the application, because you can go to the running show and you can take lots away. There's loads of good stuff there as well. But you do just take it away. And then you're almost like as confused when you went in, because you're like, I've got all this now. What do I do with it? And I think this is the biggest difference. I'm so glad you've said about this application piece. And I'm not sure if you've got a view on the National Running Show that's as strong as mine. But from your facial expressions, for those who aren't watching on YouTube, I assume you have, Kriss.
Yeah. I mean, I was there, we were there last year as a company, and got to meet amazing people. We've got some, we got to have all the right conversations as a company. We meet lots of new people and things, and it brings the community together. Like whatever I'm going to say now is like, it brings the community together. It's a great, it's a great event. It's all inspiration and all product. And in this day and age, it's not serving the community as where like the way you want these events to happen. That you want, I get the inspiration, I get the product. Like people need it, they want it, but actually, in terms of helping people have a sustainable relationship with training, to allow them to be injury free, to have a healthy relationship with their, with their nutrition, their recovery, to understand these basic principles. Like, where are these speakers? Are they up there? Are they speaking? Are they, like it's as I said, a lot of people in that room are going to be beginner runners, doing their first marathons, doing their first, some of the conversations I had last year, doing their first ultras, and they're just innocent. And they're innocent. They're excited about what they're taking on, but they are naive as to the demands that are going to be required. The expectations that they're going to need to be met. Like in terms of understanding how to fuel appropriately, how to hydrate appropriately, how to make sure their bodies are injury free or rehabilitated. And it's just the topics of conversation aren't there. And this is again potential catalysts. Again, building this type of. What I would personally love to see is something like this all under one roof. It's championing all these different aspects. We've got inspiration in there. We've got all the right kind of top athletes there, but you're also, this massive education piece isn't there. Like, and as I said, the application. Okay, hands up, who trains alone here? Who trains in a group? Who is training from home? Who has got zero time, zero finances, but wants to know how to improve themselves? This is what you could be doing, and no one's bold, no one's doing it. And and I'm just, with this, I'm intrigued. I'm personally interested to know how curious people are about their own development, about in terms of longevity, how can, like, not understanding more about your S&C, your blood and hormonal health, understanding how to fuel, how to hydrate, how to program more effectively. How is that not going to keep you doing what you want to do long into your 80s, 90s, however long you want to be doing these sports for? And yeah, that's why we're kind of not there this year, because the energy it's the wrong energy to be around. We're putting all of our energy into this, wanting to champion it as much as possible. And I'm curious to know where the community is, and funnily enough, my sister's going to the running show this weekend, and she's new to running, and she has lost she's lost some weight. I've never seen her buzzing so much. But she also knows she's also coming to 3 of these different events as well, because she wants to know about these other areas. So that's what I want. That's what I'd love to see, is people being able to do both. Being inspired, absolutely, but also learn, like. Be empowered, know what to do to help yourself forever. Like, you don't need shoes, orthotics, you don't need all that stuff. Sometimes you just need to work on yourself, invest in yourself, and this is very much what this is about: invest in your education, invest in yourself. So
it's a really nice way to put it. Yeah, the best investment you can make is in yourself. And often, if you're looking for quick wins, which we see a lot of them, it's not just the National Running Show. A lot of exhibitor stands, whether it's the London Marathon Expo, it's the same thing. People are looking for quick wins, and often quick wins are exactly that. They're only going to do something in the short term. It's not an investment for your long-term health. And yeah, I would say it's really important to have that understanding, that learning, and enjoy that learning as well with it. Go on your own journey. So how can people book on, Kriss? How can they find out more? What's the easiest way for them to, head over to a website? Is it Eventbrite they can put the tickets on?
Yep, it's an Eventbrite series as well. So we've got all the events are on Eventbrite, but also head over to strengthforendurance.com, our website, speaker series right at the top there, right in front of you. Can't miss it. Go over to our social channels, Instagram things. You'll be able to jump on the link in the bio. It'll take you straight through to the speaker series. This is what we do as a company, but it's more importantly, right, for us, it's this education piece is, as a passion, like this is very much about us really wanting to help their whole community. And this isn't biased towards any particular part of the community. This is the endurance community. And I think a lot of people I don't know, like, we work with so many different people that kind of cross over between running and triathlon and hiking and going out, going to Europe or whatever on their bike and things. So it really does cross over. But yeah, essentially head over to the website, click through on the speaker series. There's virtual seats, there's physical seats. There's a limited number of physical seats, obviously. They're moving, which is great to see. We launched it last week, and we're already seeing traction. Tickets being sold for every event, which is fantastic. But yeah, the virtual seats for those international listeners and things, or people at the other end of the country, there certainly are virtual seats available as well. So they're all very easy to purchase.
Brilliant. Well, I encourage our community to get behind it. So if you are listening and you think you can learn from one or all of those areas, then yeah, go and check it out and book a physical seat or a virtual seat. I'll be certainly looking at it and maybe encouraging some of our coaches as well to get along for a bit of coaching CPD. I think what is brilliant yet sad about this is your passion comes through so strongly, Kriss, because of your experience in the sport, and that's the brilliant thing. You're now passing that on, but the sad thing is it all comes from problems that you've seen in the past. The brilliant thing is that you wanting to solve those and help people, but it is true, isn't it? These only exist because of your experience of seeing this time and time and time again. But the brilliant part is that you're trying to help people so it doesn't happen again, or we certainly lower that rate of things like injuries, and we make sure people are living that healthy, active lifestyle. So yeah, it's good when someone's passion shines through from the experience of wanting to help someone. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, thank you. No, knowledge is power. Like, more you understand of what you can do. Like, as I said, like most people on this listening right now they're action takers, as it were. They want to make those changes themselves. And once you know certain things, you won't even consider it in the future. You'll just be a part of you'll just become autonomous. You're like, yeah, need to consider that. And guess what? Less injuries, more consistent training, better results. All of it comes from just having this multi kind of factorial kind of approach to your training, and it's the secret, but it's no secret. It's always been the way. It's just making it available to everyone, and that's the kind of that's what we want. So yeah,
cool. Fantastic message to end on. Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Kriss. Appreciate that. I've absolutely loved it. Yeah, we've thrown some kind of bits of knowledge and stuff in there as well. So hopefully people have been able to take something away from this podcast, whether they are going to sign up or not. But generally, running community, let's get behind things like this because they need to exist in order to educate people and inspire them. So yeah, check out those links, get on the website, go on socials, and if you can be there, put yourself there because I'm sure you'll benefit from it. Thanks for your time, Kriss. Really appreciate you coming on, and best of luck with everything with the Speak Series and with the business as well.
Thanks, Lewis. Much appreciated, mate.
Cheers now.
Bye, mate.